What's up, everybody? Brothers, sisters, psychonauts, and seekers of truth. It is Anonka, and welcome to my bazaar. Today, I have a DiPT trip report for you. The title of this trip report is Bohemian DiPTsody, and was submitted to Erowid in 2003 by the user Bohemian. With all that being said, let our story begin. After reading both Pical and Tikal a few years ago, one drug stood out in my mind more than any other. Disopropyl tryptamine, because it seems to cause the most unique effects, unlike any of the other substances discussed in the books. As a serious, professional musician, the substance seemed too intriguing to not experience at least once. Recently, I found a source for this drug, and did not hesitate to purchase enough for several experiments. T plus 0. At 4:40 in the afternoon, I prepared 2 glasses with approximately 30 milligrams of DiPT hydrochloride in each and some Pepsi. One for me and one for my girlfriend, to whom I will refer to in this report as X. We drank our concoctions in a single gulp. She had eaten some pizza prior to taking her dose, but my stomach was completely empty, as I had fasted for the day for the experience. My mindset was that of excitement and slight nervousness. I couldn't wait for the auditory effects to begin, as I had anticipated this experience for a long time. 20 minutes in. By 5 o'clock, we both began to feel anxious and slightly stimulated. I noticed that my pupils had become slightly dilated. After another 10 minutes, I'd become significantly nervous and stimulated, so I took a 0.5 milligram of alprazolam to ease the anxiety. I suggested we go for a walk. I was not expecting the effects to begin so quickly, and had become a little scared that it wasn't DiPT that we had taken. 30 minutes. During our walk, I began to feel quite spaced out, a little like how I felt when coming up on acid. The DiPT didn't seem to sit well with either of our stomachs, and we both felt a little gassy and nauseated. My vision was either becoming sharper due to my pupil enlargement, or I was noticing more detail in my surroundings due to the slightly psychedelic mindset. Or both. My girlfriend was feeling the same way. The nervousness was slowly wearing off, and I was beginning to enjoy the light intoxication. 45 minutes. My own voice was beginning to sound slightly deeper as we conversed during our walk, but I wasn't really sure if it was a placebo effect or not. X and I discussed the beginnings of a feeling like we both have bubble throat. You know, that funny voice you get when you get a little bubble in your throat. Outdoor noises such as lawnmowers and birds seemed normal enough. X said she felt a slight pressure in her ears, but I never noticed this effect myself. 55 minutes in. Just as we were approaching home, we suddenly noticed a distinct drop in the pitch of our voices. We thought it was hilarious and began laughing. I was excited that the DiPT was really working. After an hour, my pupils were hugely dilated, and my stomach was settled by now. I played Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. I noticed that his voice was slightly lower, along with the music itself. I was delighted with this effect, and very intrigued. Michael Jackson almost sounded like a man for once. I then played Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, It never sounded so bohemian. I was fascinated by these effects. Everything sounded much lower in tone, and unlike other reports, I noticed that chords still sounded like they should. I also noticed many overtones and notes that ordinarily weren't apparent. I think it is the overtone effect that some people hear that make them think that chords don't function as normal. I was really intrigued by the fact that the music sounded slowed down, yet the tempo was entirely intact. I played a CD of my own music. It was like hearing it for the first time, totally foreign to me. An hour and a half in, our cats sounded robotic and odd, not only because their meows sounded lower, but because the meows were flooded with rich overtones. I theorized that the DiPT is causing a sensitivity to natural overtones that are ordinarily inaudible. But then I began to doubt this, as it seemed the overtones were not entirely harmonious with the pitches, as natural overtones would be. I experimented with such theories by singing for a bit. My ability to perfectly sing along to music was not affected. Surprisingly, it was strange, because I felt like I was compensating for the lower pitch of the songs by singing lower than I ordinarily would have. I could tell by how my throat felt. But I couldn't have been. 2 hours. The telephone dial tone sounded too low, and my friends' answering machines provided much laughter, as their voices sounded too deep and were almost unrecognizable. Then I experimented with how the DiPT may be delaying sounds by clapping. No apparent delay in the sound. I put on the Back to the Future DVD. Wow, Michael J. Fox sounds like he actually hit puberty. The orchestral music of the film sounded thin and wacky, with the string sounds so full of overtones that it did begin to sound off-key. Doc sounded like an ape. The effects seemed to have peaked at this point, but it is hard to gauge any particular peak with this substance. The body mental buzz was unique and not at all unpleasant. I was actually relieved that it wasn't like a trip at all. No acid-style mindfuck or ego loss. A vague dissociated feeling seemed to be the dominant mental effect. 3 hours in, my dad called. Oh no. I had to keep from laughing at him the whole time. He sounded like a slowed-down record. He told me that he would be leaving for the weekend, and that I could stay at his house if I wanted. I told him I might do that. After 3.5 hours, the effects were still going quite strong at around 8:10, and it seemed that the overtone effect had become even stronger. I decided that we should go ahead and drive to my dad's and stay the night. He has a 60-inch widescreen TV and surround sound. I had to check it out. Although I still felt off baseline and mildly intoxicated, I was certain that I would be okay to drive. If I hadn't had someone with me, though, I wouldn't have gone out at all. 4.5 hours. We arrived in my dad's quite safely, but due to my enlarged pupils, oncoming traffic headlights had been rather distracting. We listened to music all the way there. Beethoven, David Bowie, Jefferson Airplane, John Lennon, and Ravi Shankar. Totally wild. I loved the auditory effects, and the novelty still hadn't worn off. It seemed that the overtones were mostly present only on higher-pitched, thinner sounds. Bass tones had no overtones. Strummed guitar sounded awful. At my dad's, we watched TV and ate some pizza. the effects were still strong. 6.5 hours. I experimented on the piano. Since I have perfect pitch, I was able to determine that at this point in the experience, notes on the piano were being downshifted exactly one full step. I wasn't sure if maybe now the pitches weren't being lowered as much as before, or if the shift in pitch simply varies from one sound source to the next, or if, perhaps, the shift is dose-related, or relative to the point in the experience. More experiments are necessary. Truly fascinating stuff. Even Shulgin is unsure about the exact nature of the effects on the brain this material produces. 7 hours in, I played a couple more songs, and still, the pitch was totally not normal. I am surprised at the longevity of these effects, as Shulgin describes them as generally being much shorter. We were exhausted by this point, so we decided it was time for bed. The auditory effects were still there as we drifted to sleep. I had a bit of a restless night, but it could have been unrelated to the DiPT. 16 hours. We awoke feeling totally back to normal, and all sounds had found their correct pitch and resonance. I'm still in awe of this weird chemical. I planned several more experiments with this drug, and I know a few other musicians who are curious about the effects as well. Isn't chemistry great? Alright, everyone. That is the end of our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Share with us your DiPT experiences down in the comments below. Check out the other videos and playlists on my channel. And I will see you in the next one, fam. Deuces.